Don't change that dial. It's time for your go-to source for all things entertainment and caffeinated. Now give it up and welcome to the stage, Eva and DJ!
I'm DJ Blockside.
And I'm Eva Crow.
And this is the Inks and Lattes podcast, where we're spilling the ink and dishing out drinks.
So DJ and I are both members of the Creative Coffee Cafe Discord network, an amazing place where creatives can come together, bounce ideas, and get support from their fellow creatives, and just hang out. It's an awesome community, and now we're going to feature an upcoming opportunity from those in the community, headed up by one of our members.
Now, imagine weaving tales of forgotten places with eerie gods and relentless monsters. This is your chance to shine and get your work published in an anthology that will showcase the creativity found in the Creative Coffee Cafe. Anyone lurking in the cafe's Discord channels should be familiar with our member Finn's question of the day. Well, here's a new one for you. How terrifying can the world's forgotten corners really be?
The answer? Well, it comes down to how wild your imagination can get. From now until the end of the year, you can submit your own answer to this question. We want to know about those bloodthirsty gods worshipped by some unassuming townspeople along the American byway. We want to know what monsters stalk the shadowy inner city where the police won't roam and the people live by their own rules. We want to know what horror and tragedy created another ghost town. But there's the caveat. One-word responses just won't do. We want 7,000 to 40,000 words.
So, here are the submission guidelines. The submission should fit the horror genre with a theme of forgotten places with eerie, merciless gods and monsters. It must be from 7,000 to 40,000 words long in standard manuscript format, double-spaced, with 12-point Times New Roman font. Please include a title page with your name, contact information, title, and word count. And each page in the submission should have a header with your name, an abbreviated title, and page number. We will not accept any submissions that include depictions of sexual abuse, gratuitous violence, excessive gore, hate speech, or discriminatory content.
You can submit your piece via email to members@creativecoffeecafe.com. Submissions will be accepted from now until December 31st, 2024. The review period will go until the end of May 2025, with the anthology tentatively scheduled to release on Halloween of 2025. Any questions regarding the anthology can be directed to Finn in the Creative Coffee Cafe Discord network. Finn is heading up this amazing opportunity, so be sure to reach out to him if you have any issues or questions. One last thing. Horror belongs to everyone. Members of underrepresented communities such as the LGBTQ+, Indigenous, non-Caucasian, and those with disabilities are encouraged to submit their work. Again, you can send your submissions to members@creativecoffeecafe.com. All links will be provided in the description below.
And just a quick reminder of some other great CCC related things. Luna Wolf Wyoming Designs has all kinds of beautiful tumblers, mugs, and stemless wine tumblers. They offer pre-made designs and also accept custom orders. Owner and creator Vicky has even put out a special dripping creativity tumbler that's amazing, and 15% of the sales on those will go back into the Creative Coffee Cafe.
And then don't forget to visit The Bewitchery, a small online shop that offers candles, jewelry, spell kits, fragrances, and lots of other great witchy things.
Also, Aster at Aster's Mystic Bedhead has a shop on Ko-Fi. Check out Aster's tiny art and snag your own adorable, one-of-a-kind piece of Aster's tiny art. Again, all links can be found in the description. So, now it is time for our topic of the week. And considering that school is starting for a lot of people this week, I don't know what it's like in the U.S. I know in the U.S. Some of them start in August, right?
Yeah, a lot of them start in August, but I'm from like a rural part of Ohio, and we don't start until September because of the fairs, because everybody here is in
Ah.
4-H.
I wonder if there's like a line of where they start in like August compared to like maybe is that like a south versus the north kind of thing in the U.S.?
No, I think it's just, I don't know what it is, honestly, because a lot of schools around here that are more like the city schools back at the end of August. But like where I went, we're a big country school. Like we were surrounded by fields of corn. So all of those kids do the fair, so they don't even begin school until the fairs are over, which is usually first week of September.
Oh, I never considered that there might be differences, like even across the country, as far as that's concerned. I know for like
Hmm.
I've lived in Canada and like where I live my entire life, and it's always been Labor Day, school starts. Like high
Yeah,
schools, elementary schools, everything. School year starts beginning of September, goes to like the end of June. Well, it goes to the end of June for like the elementary schools and high schools. Colleges and
right,
universities tend to end somewhere around like April, May in a lot of cases. Well, as far as regular
right.
semesters go. But
Yeah.
anyway, since we are in back to school season, we are going to talk about high schools in entertainment.
Hmm. Lots of options of what to talk about here.
Yeah, I mean, like, just think about there's so many movies and shows and just lots of creative stuff that seems to have a tie-in with high school. Like, I wonder if it's just because
Hmm.
that's when a lot of people get they start their creative juices going in high school age, maybe,
Hmm.
and then so that's where they get a lot of the inspiration. Probably some nostalgia in there too, but
Yeah, and it is like the formative years, like that is, I think, like high school is when you kind of start to develop who you're going to be as an adult to some extent. You know what I mean? People can obviously be very different as an adult than they were in high school, but it's when you start to kind of go from adolescence into adulthood slowly. So I think that's like the appeal of the high school atmosphere, and it's just so crazy the way high schools are they're shown so differently depending on time era, location. Like, I mean, one of the movies that comes to mind for me, that's one of my favorite, like, kind of movies with a high school theme, is Dazed and Confused. I love that movie, and it takes place in the 70s in Texas. So it is very different from the high school that I know.
well, and then you got different cultures in high school. Like you think of like Friday
Hmm.
Night Lights kind of thing, where it's like about the football high
Mm,
school culture. Then you got like Glee, which is about high school culture with more of a,
mm,
and that was more of a modern kind of high school
yes.
setting as
That
well, in
takes
that kind of sense.
place. Yeah, that takes place in Ohio, by the way.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, that's right. I do remember.
Yeah,
I do remember that. I did actually
yeah.
watch Glee. I am a
I
Glee.
love Glee.
What do they
Hmm.
call them? I guess like a Gleek. I don't know.
Yeah. It's because we were choir kids. That's
Yeah,
why we
yeah.
love Glee.
I think the one I remember watching when I was a kid that really like kind of introduced me to high school was Saved by the
Mhm.
Bell.
Yes, I was just gonna say that. I still will occasionally watch Saved by the Bell. I think it was on Hulu for a long time. I think it still might be. And it's just so good. Like, and it's very different from the high school I knew because it's, California.
Yeah.
But I loved that show growing up. That was like the coolest high school.
Yeah, like everyone wanted to be everyone. Like I loved Screech, for instance, because Screech
Right.
I kind of felt like I was that kind of like person in high school, and I liked that he was part of like he was different, but he was still accepted and part of the rest of the
The
group, right?
group.
Even yeah, and so it
Yeah.
was kind of cool to see a guy like Screech be accepted among his peers like that, even though he's like weird and geeky and just like zany,
Yeah.
but and I kind of identified with that. So it was really cool to see
And
that kind of thing in that show.
yeah, and that's like for me watching that show, I always loved Jessie with the curly hair. Like Jessie
Oh,
was
yep.
the girl who was always about like being there and being in school and getting the grades, but she was very passionate about like women's rights. And she
Hmm.
was always the one that was like getting behind some kind of cause because no shade to Kelly because everybody loves Kelly and Zach, but they were like the quintessential popular kids.
Yeah.
And we all knew those kids and I was friends with a lot of different people in high school, but I definitely related to Jessie and her like always trying to get behind some kind of cause.
Trying almost like yeah that honor roll student kind of person like that where
Yeah.
they're taking that stuff seriously, but it's cool because again she's accepted as a friend with the rest of the people, and I think that was really nice about that show was it showed all these different kind of characters and how they
Hmm.
can coexist and not necessarily have to be
Yeah.
against each other but with each other and for each other and support each other.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever watched the show Boy Meets World.
I did. Yep.
It
Yep.
Oh, that is still to this day in my top 3 favorite, all-time favorite television shows that I grew up with.
Corey and
I
Topanga
related
forever.
so hard. Corey and Topanga forever, and Sean being a hot mess forever, Eric being an idiot forever, all of the
And
things.
Mr.
Like, I, to
Feeney.
this
I mean,
day oh,
Mr.
dude,
Feeney was
don't
the
start me on
teacher.
Mr. Feeney. He's like 1,000 years old. The William Daniels that plays Mr. Feeney. My friend that works with me, we are both obsessed with him as a human being because he's the sweetest man alive. And we're both like, oh my God, Feeney is getting so old. I can't. That's gonna kill me. Like, I adore Mr. Feeney, and I wanted a teacher like Mr. Feeney in my life.
Yeah, and I
That to me was
love
like
that
yeah,
was
that was
that.
the most relatable high school for me because it was like East Coast. It was very much like I think it's Philadelphia. I'm from Ohio, it's not super far. That one was the most relatable for me, and it was kind of the same time era as well.
And it was nice because I liked Mr. Feeney was great because he was a great role model for what should be like a teacher and that kind of
And
like
a mentor.
representative and mentor. Yeah, exactly. So he
Mm,
was like I think of how many of us who grew up watching that show like look at Mr. Feeney as being the representative of the kind of person that we wanted to have as a teacher. And so like oh
hmm
like if you could if you as a teacher I imagine in that era were compared to Mr. Feeney, that was just like the best
Oh yeah, top tier.
compliment you could ever get.
Yeah, and like I even remember like loving the parents, like Amy and Alan, like they were the
Yep.
perfect high school parents, and like I love that show
I
so
like
much.
that
Like I could
they,
talk about Boy
yeah,
Meets World
and
forever.
I, I like too that everyone in that show was very like real. Like they weren't perfect. They
Yes.
were imperfect people trying to do the thing that they thought was right and good, and screwing up in some
Yes.
cases, but still they would resolve it in ways where they understood that they were doing things wrong in some cases, but they would forgive each
Mm-hmm.
other. They would deal with the issues and
Yep.
then talk to each other and communicate and show love to each other. And it would that Boy Meets World is just that there's a reason
It
that it's
is.
beloved, really.
It really is. And like the friendship between Corey and Sean is so good. And like you just experience everything with them growing up in that show. Cause I mean, it starts when they're in, I think, sixth, seventh grade, like
Oh,
going into like high school at the very beginning.
it's
And then
funny
it goes
seeing the
all the
first
way through
seasons how young they
college.
are.
Oh my God, Corey's just a little baby.
And
I
then
love
yeah,
it
by
so
the time
much.
it's done, they're going off to college, and it's just like no, you're right. We see them, and I think that's the appeal of like high school shows and movies too. Is
Mm-hmm.
it's got that coming of age, like the
Yep.
classic coming of age movie or show is like it's pretty much you're always going to be doing high school students at that point because that is when you often
It
like you were
never gets
talking about
old.
earlier. Yeah, everyone goes
Yeah.
through it.
Mhm. Like, one I always think about when I think of, like, high school films and stuff is, like, Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yep.
Everybody has seen that film has been like, "Oh, man, I wanna have, like, a Ferris Bueller's hooky type day." Everybody wants it. We all have a friend like Cameron that's, like, telling us not to do it.
It's funny because
It's just so
I
good.
was both Cameron and Ferris Bueller in some ways.
Yeah, I love that's like one of the most like iconic monologues too to ever come from like cinema is that Ferris Bueller monologue. The whole life moves pretty fast. That whole thing is just so good and so like indicative of the high school experience and like being a senior and doing like senior skip day and all of those things and being worried you're going to get caught. It's so good. And The
No,
Breakfast Club,
it's the
obviously.
hot drinks. Yeah, yeah. Breakfast Club, another can like there were a lot of those. I feel like the '80s was a huge peak for like high
Mm,
school movies in particular. Like I feel '80s was about high school movies. '90s was more
for
about
sure.
high school shows in that kind of sense. For like
Yeah.
I think the '90s and 2000s it was more the shows. So like you got like your Dawson's Creek, you got like your
Mm,
stuff like that. You got like the Boy Meets World. You've got Saved by the Bell. I think Saved by the Bell actually kind of kickstarted the high school show kind of experience in
mm-hmm.
that kind of
For
sense.
sure. Because that was,
And
like,
then
gotta be late '80s into early '90s.
yeah, Saved by the Bell, yeah, late '80s, early '90s, and you had Boy Meets World in the '90s. You got Buffy in the 2000s because that was also another high
Mhm.
school setting show there. a
which is
little
crazy to
more.
think about.
Yeah, I mean, it is a high school movie. Obviously, it's not really technically focused on high school. It's more about just like the vampire like kind of show, like a horror kind. Well, not a horror, but like
Right,
I guess
but
it's like a comedy. It is high school though,
the
because it is focused on
paranormal, yeah.
yeah a paranormal show, but set in high school.
Yeah, and like
Uh,
movie-wise, you even from like the 80s, you've got like Teen Wolf
yep.
and stuff like that with yeah, there's a lot of good ones that just and it's just crazy to see how different high schools are portrayed. Because there were times where I was like, "Oh man, I wish I went to a high school like that." But,
And again, it
and
all depends on where you're from too, right?
mhm. Yep, I think that kind of determines like what you find more relatable. Like I know in the 90s, like 2000s, it was like Degrassi was
Yeah,
like the big
yep.
thing.
Yep, but that was Canadian
Is
there too.
Degrassi?
So
I was gonna say that Degrassi's Canadian, right? Yeah, I thought
Degrassi is
so.
Canadian. Yep, yep. That's where the I believe the next generation Degrassi one is where Drake
Mhm.
became famous.
Yep. Yep. I never got super into it, but I think I was just a little bit older when it came out,
Yeah,
so
it
I
was
wasn't like
never.
as
It
invested in
wasn't
it.
something that I really like watched on. Like I knew about it, but I never watched it religiously or anything like that. Actually, I remember what
Right.
I
Like had
watched
I
too was Sabrina the Teenage Witch was another one that I watched
yep.
with
Yep.
Melissa Joan Hart.
Yep, that was a good one. That was a good one for sure. Yeah, well, so we've talked about all the different types of high school and entertainment, but like now I think we should move on to our picks of the week,
All
which
right.
are our favorite films with high school aspect. Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Oh, you can go first.
Okay, mine I feel like I mean both of our picks are very popular picks, but I chose 10 Things I Hate About You. I love that movie. It is in my top probably my top 5 all-time favorite movies. It is fantastic. It has an amazing cast. You've
That was
got
with Heath
Joseph
Ledger,
Gordon-Levitt,
right?
Heath Ledger.
I
Oh,
was gonna
early
say,
Heath
yeah,
Ledger too.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, so good. Like Julia Stiles was like the 90s, early 2000s. She was like the early 2000s like queen.
yeah.
I still love her to this day, but that whole movie takes place in and around a high school in California, like a rich part of California. I remember being like, "My God, that's their high school?" Because it looks like a castle. Like it's enormous. And it was just the coolest movie when it came out. And it was so funny and so smart. And even though I couldn't really relate to the high school itself, you could relate to like the shenanigans within it and stuff. And like the characters within it. There's a part in the beginning where the main one of the main characters, Cameron, is new to the school and he has this guy showing him around basically and like giving him the ropes and he goes through like all the different like cliques of people. He's like, you've got your basic beautiful people, unless they talk to you first, don't bother. It's like all the really like rich kids that are popular. And then he has like these kids here are the future Ivy Leaguers, and they're all the really smart kids. There's like a cowboy group. There's like a Rastafarian
Kind of
group,
reminds you of
and
Mean
it's
Girls in a way, where they're introducing all the different things
yeah,
there too, right?
all the different like cliques
Yeah, yeah. We can all relate to that, really.
yeah, it's such a great film. Like the dad in 10 Things I Hate About You is one of the most like underrated characters because he is so unhinged. And I forget who plays the dad. He's very famous actor. I don't know if you've ever seen For Richer or Poorer with Tim Allen and Kirstie Alley. He's
No.
in that, but like the dad is just like constantly trying to keep his daughters from growing up. And he's got the older daughter Kat and the younger daughter Bianca, and Bianca's like the popular girl who loves everything and she's like wants to go to parties and do the whole high school thing. And Kat, aka Julia Stiles' character, hates high school. She wants to get out. She wants to get far away from the school, go to college like on the other side of the country. And the whole thing is about how the dad doesn't let them date. And he finally creates a rule like Bianca can date when Kat dates. And so it becomes this whole thing. And it's so funny though. It is such a great movie. I love it to pieces. Like it never gets old. It's another one of those that has like one of the most iconic little monologue bits that is just it's the bit at the end where she Julia Stiles' character does this whole poem that she has to read out loud for the class that she wrote, and she wrote it about like the guy, and it's just
Oh,
it's so good. It is such a like iconic moment in cinema, and it's just if anyone from that time era that loves that movie, they know that monologue by heart. I know it by heart. I won't recite it, but I know it by heart.
isn't that based off a Shakespeare play too? I think
It is. It is.
it's
It's
good.
based
Yeah,
off of
I'm trying to
oh
remember which
god,
one
which
it
one is
is.
it? Now it's gonna bug me because I know what it's based off of what is let me Google it real quick. 10 things I hate. I know I'm gonna know it as soon as I
You're gonna kick
see it.
yourself as soon as you find out, right?
It's it's based off The Taming of the Shrew.
Oh, okay.
That's what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Yeah, it's loosely like a modern day retelling of that because she
Very
is like the
loosely.
shrew. Yeah. Yeah. She's the girl that everyone in school is like, wow, she's a bitch, and everybody knows it. And then Heath Ledger's character gets hired to take her out on dates so that the guy that hires her can take out her younger sister. And like, it's
Oh,
just
okay.
so good. Yeah.
That makes
That's the
sense
whole
with what
premise
you're
is like,
talking about. Okay. So they
yeah,
don't really
she's
care
like
about each
known
other. So it's like it's kind of an
in the
enemies to
beginning.
lovers kind of thing, basically.
Yeah, like in the beginning, Heath Ledger gets paid to take her out, and because he's a guy that like kind of has all these like rumors swirling around about him. Like there's one part where the one guy, it's like they're trying to convince him to take her out, and Heath Ledger's character is drinking in a bar, like he's he's drinking, and the one guy's like. There's a rumor going around that like he had sold his liver on the black market for a new pair of speakers. It's like he's the kind of guy that like people just make rumors up about. And the one guy's like, "Should you be drinking alcohol when you don't have a liver?" And Heath Ledger's like, "What?" He's like, "Nothing, nothing."
Like,
So
wait,
he's like
what?
that guy. Yeah, he's the only guy that they can like convince to like be paid to take her out because he's kind of rough around the edges and then it's just so good. Like it's such a great movie and it actually has like this really poignant message to it. It's just excellent. So if you haven't seen it, you should for sure watch 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, I
For sure.
haven't seen that one yet, so I will definitely have to watch that at some point. I mean, like, it's funny because at this point, it's probably one where like it would be more towards the people that would be my kids' age now, but
Yeah,
or
but
like
it's
it's something
crazy
if I
that
had to
one
get,
like
yeah.
yeah, like it still holds up though. Like even when you watch it now, because it came out so long ago now at this point, but like it still holds up to this day. It's still a great movie when you watch it. It doesn't feel super dated. Like it's just great. It's a great movie.
All right, so now I guess it is my turn now, and yeah, like you said before,
Yes.
the one I selected is probably one that everyone knows. Probably one of the ones that the most popular movie probably ever, really. Back to the Future.
Mhm.
And I
It's
mean,
a good
I'm
one.
yeah, it's a good one, and I'm of course like a lot of people might not think of it as a high school movie necessarily, but yeah, it is definitely a high school movie. I mean, the whole premise of the first movie, and I'm going to be mainly just focusing on the original, the first Back to the Future, because the
Right.
other two aren't really high school movies at that point. The other two are actually much more sci-fi, and this one is much more of an
Mhm.
actual, just like a high school hijinks with like, kind of a little bit of sci-fi added to it in the sense where he's going back in time, right? But this one is
Right.
very much about like, and I almost feel like it's a difference it's almost like showing the generation gap and how similar, even though things are different, it's also kind of similar, really, the way high school is, in that everyone, because he goes back in time and sees his parents as high school people, and you never
Mhm.
think it's hard to think about your own parents being high schoolers, being young, and going through their own
Right.
coming of age moments. We don't think about that because we didn't go through it. We never saw it, and so it's kind of like it's weird to think about it. But then that's what I like about the movie, where it shows Marty going back, seeing what his parents are like as high schoolers, and being
Mhm.
like he finds out his dad was a peeping tom. He finds out that his mom, who he thought was this person that's just like telling like she's telling him all these things he's not supposed to do, like don't
Yeah.
smoking, and then finds out that she smokes and that she's like this badass like woman.
Yeah.
And totally different than what he expects, and I like that because it can really show that our parents, that there's generation gaps, but our parents were kids once too, and I think it's good to
Right.
remember in that kind of sense, like especially now that we're older too, to remember what it was like when we were young, because it can help us relate to what high schoolers are going through now. And even though the experience might be different, like even for Marty, his experience was different in high school than what his parents were like, and he had to adjust to the way things were back then and kind of work with that. And in the same way, I feel that we now, being older, like I have to adjust to the way that high schoolers are now and how different it is now, compared to how it was back then, particularly with technology right now as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so I think that's really where like high school movies are really nice to be able to show and depict like you were talking about before, how things can change and how things are different based on where you are and when you are, and it can really like I. It would be nice for kids right now growing through high school to see what high school was like back then as well, so they can see how different it was. And I'm sure a lot of them will probably laugh at some things too. And you know what? I'm sure there were things that we saw when we were growing up with old movies in high school where we're like, oh, really? That's what it was like back then? But I mean, yeah, but I mean, like think about how much smoking was depicted as just like such a normal thing, and now it's just, well, I think there still is, but it's definitely not nearly as like uh,
Right.
you can't just do it anywhere like you could back then.
Right. Yeah, like my mom has actually told me before because we went to the same high school. And my mom has actually told me in my high school, there was this one middle section of the school where, like, all four rooms in the middle of the school had windows that looked out into this random rectangular courtyard. It was just grass in the middle of the school. And my mom was like, yeah, that's where we used to go to smoke. And I was like, what? She's like, "Yeah, like, when you had lunch break, you would go to the courtyard and you could, like, sit outside, there were, like, tables out there and you could, like, smoke." And I was just like, "What? What?" Like, because when I was in school, we were always like, "What is the purpose of that?" Like, "What are we doing with that chunk of land in the middle of the school that, like, nobody goes into?" Like, it was just there. And then I found out, like, yeah, that's where they used to smoke,
I wonder if it
weirdly
was
enough.
designed for that, or if that's just where they were like, hey, you know what? This works for us being able to smoke out there.
Right, and, like, every you could see out there from, like, 4 different rooms, so it's not like people didn't know they were out there smoking. Like, people knew.
Yeah, but imagine the teachers, because it was not sure acceptable. Teachers just like, whatever. If you're gonna do it out there.
Right? Yeah, exactly. It
Yeah,
is
like
crazy
yeah,
when you think about the difference, and that's what's cool about Back to the Future too, is you get to see, like, 80s high school versus what, 50s high school?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, yeah,
50s, yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's
55
so
versus
good.
85. Yeah, and it's funny the thing about it. If they had it now, we would be going back in time to
Oh, no.
1994.
Oh my god, I saw a thing like that, and it was about Dazed and Confused, and that's what it was. It was like Dazed and Confused was filmed in the 90s, took place in the 70s. The equivalent today would be exactly what you just said, which is insane to think about.
That's the
Because
thing.
'Cause I'm pretty
Like
sure the
if
90s were like 10 years ago. You know, I'm pretty sure they were.
But it's funny, like you
Uh,
think about it. If Back to the Future was done now, it would be set. Marty would be going back to 1994, and I'm thinking like, oh
oh my
God,
god.
like I was almost going to high school by.
Mm. Oh, all the, like, baggy Jinko jeans and the oversized T-shirts and the, like, the oh god, yeah, that would be wild. How has someone not done that yet? Like a new, like, Back to the Future. I'm
You
surprised
know
they haven't
what?
tried to revamp that yet.
I think I heard that they're trying to make a Back to the
Of
Future
course they
4.
will.
I know, right? I don't
Yeah.
think they should. Like
I don't think so either, but they will.
yeah, they will. They will. If they can, they
And we'll
will.
be like, "Nobody asked for this."
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, I think it is definitely
Okay.
one of those films that no one is asking a sequel for. It was just such a perfect trilogy, really. Like there's no way you can make it better. There's no way
Right.
you'd be able to match what that movie meant and how
Oh,
perfect
for
it was.
sure. For sure. It's an iconic movie for good reason. Like it really is a great movie. And just Michael J. Fox is so good in that movie. He's so perfect. I love it. Well,
Doc!
I think that's
Yeah, that's all the
I
time
think
we
that's
have now.
gonna yeah, we're gonna have to wrap up this week's episode of Inks and Lattes. But thanks so much for hanging out with us. We are here every Wednesday as part of the Dripping Creativity podcast, hosted by the amazing Chris Corbin. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know why you haven't, but you absolutely should if you haven't already.
Yeah, and if you want more information about joining the Creative Coffee Cafe and how you can get involved, you can go to the website, creativecoffeecafe.com. More info. It's got info about our show. It's got info about the Dripping Creativity podcast. Anything you want to know about Creative Coffee Cafe, how you can join our Discord, you can go to creativecoffeecafe.com. And lastly, if you have any news or projects you want to share, send it over to submit @creativecoffeecafe.com. Even things you want, like if you want to have us showcase something on our show or something you want us to just share, send it to us, and if we can, we'll get it on the next episode or whenever we can get it next. And again, thanks again for tuning in to Inks and Lattes, where we're spilling the ink and dishing out drinks.